everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight for our Parenting for Prevention meeting. My name is Corey Alloway. I am the program specialist for the City of Santa Clarita's drug prevention for the DFY.SantaClarita.gov. And before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a very special guest here with us tonight. I'm going to introduce Council Member Ayala. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all the parents of Santa Clarita for your interest about your kids. And that's an applause for you. Let me do that applause for you, for the parents that are here, and for the parents that are going to see the video later. Because you know, this is a very important issue, what we're going to have today. On behalf of the City of Santa Clarita, I want to welcome you and come with us for resources to guide your families, your kids, and that's why we're here with you. So I'm going to leave the floor for the experts on the field, and let's start. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. So DFY.SantaClarita.gov, which stands for Drug-Free Youth in the Santa Clarita Valley, is a drug prevention program for elementary, junior high, and high school students in the Santa Clarita Valley. The purpose is to raise awareness among students on the risks associated with drugs and empower students to make good choices and to prevent substance use and to live a healthy lifestyle being drug-free. Throughout the year, we visit numerous campuses where we host our drug awareness assemblies for the fourth grade to sixth grade students. For the junior high and high schools, we have student-led clubs where they offer drug awareness activities once a month for the student body. We also support parents through the Parenting for Prevention campaign, which this meeting today is part of that initiative. The Parenting for Prevention is a citywide initiative designed to support parents and caregivers in guiding their children toward healthy, drug-free choices. We launched a podcast that provided expert advice to parents on how to help their child deal with drugs. You can find this podcast on YouTube, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and at the City of Santa Clarita. You can also find valuable resources on the Parenting for Prevention website. Today's meeting would not be possible without Mr. Frias. Thank you so much for hosting us this evening. I would also like to thank all of our community members or community partners who are here today to be a part of our resource fair. We appreciate your time and your time to help with the families and the resources. So I'd like to now introduce the guest speaker, Lindsey Rae Ackerman, a marriage family therapist and the Vice President of Clinical Services for Clear Behavioral Health. Lindsey, thank you so much for being here today.
Of course, thank you. All right, hi everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good, because I told them I did not need a microphone. I was actually a varsity cheerleading captain in high school, so I know how to project from my diaphragm, so that's good. So welcome everyone. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, so I work clinically a lot of times with families, individuals around these topics that we'll be speaking about more in depth today. I also serve as the Vice President of Clinical Services for Your Behavioral Health, which is the parent organization for Clear Behavioral Health, and I'll get into that a little more at the end when we go over potential resources for any teens or adults that could be struggling. So thank you so much, all of you, for coming and being here. Your presence here is very important, and it shows that you're already taking a proactive approach to prevention. So you should really give yourselves a pat on the back and know that, I see a lot of teens that are with their parents, and that is already steps ahead of where, you need to be in regards to having these types of open dialogues and conversations. All right. So, as we can see, according to the National Institute for Drug Abuse, by the 12th grade, so many students and teens have already engaged in experiencing and experimenting or using different types of drugs and alcohol, specifically marijuana, alcohol, and nicotine. And the goal here, I'm really going to be focusing a lot on parents, right? And hopefully it's to have you all become more comfortable with having open dialogue about these topics and these concerns. So we don't want you to become, private eye experts, right? We want you to really just have open dialogue and be able to have open conversations with your teens about this. So it's very normal to feel concerned about potential drug and alcohol use as a parent. Anxiety, fear, all very typical parts, specifically when you have an adolescent that's going into teenage years, right? And today we'll be discussing practical strategies and prevention and early detection and intervention as well. So first, just starting out with a little bit of knowledge so that we can manage expectations. A lot of times when I work with parents, the thing that I see them struggling with the most is being able to manage their expectation around what the teen is actually capable of, right? So we know that approximately around 25 years old is when the brain is fully developed, right? So until then, there's a lot that happens in different parts of the brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, which is where all that executive functioning happens. So it's our ability to, make decisions, right? Carry out daily tasks throughout the day, and as well as controlling our impulses. So those are all really, really important things to be able to do when we're navigating this big, huge world and the potential consequences of our actions, right? Also, the reward system of our brain is not fully developed until we're about 25 either. So we are going to seek out pleasure and kind of that instant gratification for pleasure, right? So this just hopefully helps you recognize and understand where your teen's brain is at during development and why they're struggling potentially so much, right? Because as older individuals, right, sure, we can think back to when we were teens, right, all the time. Okay, yeah, right, I knew that I struggled here. I knew that, maybe my hormones were all over the place. My emotions were all over the place, right? But it's hard for us to remember the fact that we couldn't wrap our heads around long-term consequences for an action that made us feel good in the moment, right? So it's really important for parents to understand that when they're trying to reason with their teen, right? Because you're not reasoning with a brain that's fully developed, right? And no shade on the teens, all right? It's just a normal part of developmental things. So we kind of understand, right? All of these things make a lot more sense when we're coming at it from a specific place where we're managing expectations. So we'll review some common signs. These signs alone don't necessarily indicate alcohol use, but certainly warrant attention, right? So you can see here, right, some of the physical signs and behavioral signs of both alcohol and marijuana, which I focused on specifically. So sleep changes, coordination, some of the more overt things, right, that we know when someone is under the influence of alcohol, right? They're clumsy, they're stumbling, they're slurring, things of that nature. But some of the more covert items might be the excessive use of mouthwash, brushing teeth, gum, right? Trying to mask any type of odor, right? So those are things to kind of look out for because that's not necessarily a normal thing unless we're dealing with some sort of other maybe comorbid mental health issues like OCD, right? And that's a whole different conversation, right? When it comes to any sort of compulsive or excessive washing of hands or brushing of teeth, right? But that's a separate mental health issue. typical academic, sudden changes, right? Failing all of a sudden out of nowhere, new social groups of friends and being secretive about things. So a very big change in typical behavioral patterns, right? It's normal for teens to want an increase in privacy as they're growing and developing, right? However, if you see a huge change in that desire for real big privacy, that's something that you might want to talk about, right? Things over on the marijuana use, right? We're looking for not just red eyes, we're looking for bloodshot eyes, right? Sometimes I see that parents can become hypervigilant, especially if their teen has maybe experimented in the past, or they're running with a group of friends that teens or parents have heard maybe are experimenting, right? So again, we're looking for very specific signs. Sometimes you don't get a lot of sleep and your eyes are a little red, right? Or you've been rubbing them, or you've been crying, right? But no, we're looking for bloodshot eyes and very heavy lids. We're looking for a lack of motivation, fatigue, right? Not wanting to kind of get up and go anywhere or do anything. When it comes to motivation as well, the big changes that we look for behaviorally when it comes to any kind of substance use or mental health issues as clinicians is we look when a teen has really enjoyed something and all of a sudden they're not doing and engaging in anymore. So maybe they've always been, into sports or into reading or, doing something very specific like a hobby, and all of a sudden there's no interest, there's no desire, right? Mood swings, irritability. Anybody with a teenager that's parenting a teenager might be like, well, that's just normal. And sometimes it is, right? But again, we're looking for more extremes, right? Okay, so understanding risk factors. So when we look at things like family history, mental health issues, social dynamics, and academic pressures, these are all things that can contribute to your teen being at higher risk for that experimental phase to kind of go off the rails, right? So we're looking at genetic predisposition. So do you have any sort of alcoholism or drug addiction that runs in your family, right? That can predispose your kid towards that. Importance of having open discussion about family history is incredibly important. A lot of times there's a stigma, right? There's shame around it. I have found working with families, it is so important that teens understand, hey, your uncle so-and-so, your aunt so-and-so, grandma, grandpa, right? Someone in your family has struggled with this, right? And these are some of the things that happened, in their life because of that, and in our life because of it. It's how the family was impacted, right? We call it a family disease. I don't like using that word anymore. I just say it's a family dynamic struggle, and it very much is because it impacts the entire family system. So mental health, I mentioned before, having comorbid diagnoses for mental health issues. Sometimes, right, individuals will turn towards utilizing alcohol or drugs as a way to self-medicate because they're struggling with depression, they're struggling with anxiety, they're struggling with maybe something like obsessive compulsive disorder, right? So it's really important, again, to have that open dialogue where teens can come to talk about things that they're struggling. Hey, it's really hard for me. I get up in the morning and my heart is racing and I don't know why, but I feel really nervous. And that's really important to be able to communicate, right? Because that isn't typical. And it's not something that you need to be struggling with, right? There's resources and support that can help. Social dynamics, obviously there's peer pressure, which is a big, big component. Teens are going to deal with that with everything, not just drug and alcohol use, right? what they wear and who they hang out with and how they act and behave, right? There's a lot of pressure. And there's also a lot of trying to figure out what my identity is in those adolescent and teen years, right? And that's a hard thing to do, figuring out who you are, who you want to be, what your beliefs are, your values are, how you are either the same and or different from your family. So also academic pressures. So there's a lot of college preparation, a lot of maybe standards and expectation from the family on how the teen actually navigates school, pressure around grades and getting specific grades. So again, that we know as adults, right, we have pressure to succeed in work, pressure to earn a certain amount, right, all of those things. And again, remember, we have fully developed brains. So we are more resourced than, our kids are. So it's important to understand that. Okay, so building protective factors. These are really, really important. So we can do these in a number of different ways, and research shows that these factors significantly reduce the use of substances. So when we think about family bonds, again, always repeat myself like a broken record around open dialogue and communication, which is hard. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. Regular quality time as a family. That's really important. Creating safe spaces for conversations. So can your teen come to you and have an open conversation, or are they fearful that if they come to you because they're struggling, that they're just going to get in trouble and that's going to be the end, they're grounded for life, they have no phone forever, right? So again, that's really important part of the dynamic in the family and how you conversate as a family. Clear expectations, so consistent messaging around responsibilities and expectations and tolerance around substance use, chores, all of those things. The thing that I think I talk about the most with parents is around having clear communication and being consistent, right? Oftentimes, we're all human beings. We're trying to figure out how to do this. Even if you're a parent with multiple kids, right? Every kid is different. And so you might have gone through having the first child and you're like, okay, never had to deal with substance use or anything like that. They just did what they were told, right? And all of a sudden now the second kid comes along and you're like, what in the world, right? It's a different set of parenting skills oftentimes. So don't be afraid to, kind of shift and pivot when needed. I always try to explain to parents that when you look at your kids, because if you have multiple children, right, you have to look at them as an individual relationship, right? And within that, there are relationship dynamics that go into any relationship that we have, right? Right now, we're all in a relationship together, right? Because we're in this room, right? But then we have more intimate relationships, like the relationship with your partner, right? The relationship with your child, right? And those dynamics are very important. We talk about positive activities, so really encouraging things that the teen has interest in and finds, pleasurable and exciting and helps motivate them. So whatever that might be, hobbies, sports, things that are what we would look at as adaptive coping skills to deal with stress. And then I talked about communication already. We'll talk about that several more times. All right, so setting effective boundaries. So what's the difference between a boundary and a rule, right? This is something that I think a lot of relational dynamics within the parent-child dynamic struggle with often, right? Because oftentimes parents will just take an authoritative kind of stance and it's like, well, it's the rule because I said so, right? Teens, how much do you like that? Exactly, right? It doesn't necessarily feel good, right? Because when I talk to parents, I'm always like, listen, teens don't have that much control, And developmentally, they're actually trying to figure out their autonomy and where boundaries are, right? But that's hard to do when you feel like you have no control, right? So of course you're going to get frustrated, right? And again, that's why we talk about open dialogue and we look at it more as a relationship versus, well, I'm the parent and what I say goes, right? While yes, of course, we have to have rules within a household for safety, right? It's very important. It's your parent's job to keep you safe, right? There's actually laws around that. They could get in trouble, right? So we want to respect that. That is part of the relational dynamic that you're in, while also inviting your parents to talk to you like a normal human being, right? Because that's important too. And your thoughts and your feelings matter. They're part of the relational dynamic, right? And so it is very, very important to set and define boundaries, right? So a boundary is more about the person that's setting them than the person that's actually having them told to them, right? So parents, that's actually helpful to help you determine the difference between a boundary and a rule, right? You can have rules in your household, right? And that might be a zero tolerance for substance and alcohol. And that is okay, right? Because that is your home and those are your rules and you pay all the bills. And so that makes sense. Now, there's a difference between boundaries, right? So maybe we can talk about a boundary around how you all communicate with each other, right? So I'm the parent and I'm talking to my teen and my teen starts yelling and raising their voice. And I say, hey, listen, I cannot talk to you when you're screaming at me. I can't do it, right? So I'm going to walk away and I'm going to give you 10 minutes or however much time you need to calm down. And I'm going to be right over here in the kitchen. And I'm ready to talk whenever you are. Right? So again, what you're doing, that's a boundary, right? You're saying, hey, I can't communicate like this. So you're not saying, hey, stop yelling, right? You're saying, hey, I can't communicate like this. So I'm going to be over here and I'm available to you, right? Because as, parents, that's our job, right? We have to be available to our teens. It's part of our job to hold the safety container for them, right? But it's okay to also have boundaries. You don't need to be screamed at if you're just trying to help, right? But again, remember, fully developed brain, well-resourced adult human, right? So yeah, a lot kind of goes on you for keeping the pace of a lot of hard conversations, right? Age-appropriate limits. So that's around things like curfews, check-in protocols, social media, phone usage. Again, that's all, right, part of a conversation that needs to be had. And parents, I always encourage, what do you think is age appropriate, right? Ask other parents, ask school counselors, right? Ask therapists, right? We'll tell you, right? And then you can have that open dialogue around rules and boundaries. Natural consequences. All right, parents, I know this is really hard. And let me tell you, your job is one of the most difficult. And teens, you may not remember this, but maybe you will one day. You'll be in your upper 20s and your brain will be fully developed and you'll be like, you know what? I remember that lady, Lindsey Rae, saying this. I never thought she'd be right? Because for me, it was, in my 20s. I'll never forget it, right? I was grocery shopping and something happened and I remember thinking, oh my God, she was right. Thinking about my mom all the years that she had told me something. I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about, right? And that happens, right? But parents, here's the big thing about natural consequences. They're big, amazing, wonderful teachers. And sometimes as hard as it is, to watch your kids stumble and literally fall flat on their face? Sometimes it has to happen. Not always. I see a lot of dynamics happening between the parent and child dynamic in this room right now. And that's good. That's a good thing, right? And again, not always. Remember, your parent's job, part of it is to keep you safe, right? So again, the goal in all this, maintaining connection while you're having these conversations about the hard things, maintaining the connection while you're setting the boundaries, setting the rules. So creating clear rules, right? I always encourage a collaborative approach. I've talked about it a little bit, right? Including the teen in the rule setting, right? Listening to their perspective. Again, remembering they're a human too, right? And it's really important to allow them to be part of the conversation. So you can always explain your rationale behind the rule as well, right? We talked a little bit about, oh, it's because I'm the parent and what I say goes. It doesn't work well, right? And we've kind of broke down why. So not being afraid to literally explain why there's a rule, right? Written agreements. So sometimes this is necessary, right? And we all know there are different learning styles, right? So I know me, for one, I am a visual learner. I have to see something in writing in order to really wrap my head and actually comprehend it, right? So if we're just talking and talking and talking to our teen, it might be just going in and around and then out, and they're not comprehending it, right? So sometimes written agreements or written boundaries, written rules can be really helpful. It can also help, identify specific consequences around things so that everybody's on the same page. You can kind of go back to it. You can refine it when and if needed. So don't be afraid to do that. And then a regular review of any of these set rules, boundaries, and consequences. Again, very, very important. All right, building healthy habits. So this is mostly all typical things, right? But there's family habits, and then there's individual habits for the teen and the parent, right? Because we're modeling the behavior for our teen. So there's suggestions here. So regular meals, that is not always manageable, right? These days because of schedules and, sports and all the after school activities. However, research does show that shared meals is a very, very big protective factor. Again, because it opens up the opportunity to communicate. So even if you cannot do these on a daily basis, even having 2-3 times a week is extremely helpful. Open dialogue, we've talked about this a lot. It's very important to create opportunities for your teens. I'm not gonna spill my secrets for parents because teens are here, and then that would totally defeat the point. But if you want to know any of my secrets, please come up and ask me, and I will give them to you around this specific thing, creating opportunities to talk to your teens, because I have a really good set of sneaky ones that work. Active listening. It's really important to show your teen that you actually are listening to them, mirroring back what they're saying, that you're comprehending, that you understand, that you respect them as a human being and the part of your family. It goes a long way. Quality time. We talked about that one, how important it is. And then individual habits. And remember, right, so many of us learn through observation, right? So I always tell parents, because they're like, what can I do? What's the best thing? What's the biggest tip that you have? And I'm like, take care of yourself. Do your own work. Be an amazing, wonderful walking example for your teen because they're watching you, right? So it's really important. Stress management. How do we cope with stress, right? Sleep hygiene. Are we sleeping regularly? Are we sleeping enough? So many of adults, I think, forget or don't know the developing teen brain actually needs quite a bit amount of sleep. We're talking anywhere from 9 to 10, 11 hours, as opposed to a fully developed brain that only needs between 7 and 9 hours, okay? Friendship choices, so obviously very supportive around supporting networks, and then activities. We already talked about that, encouraging them to do things that they enjoy. All right, so I didn't actually know that teens were gonna be here. I thought it was only gonna be parents. So this we'll talk about a little bit, but again, I broached on it briefly before. Parents, you have one of the hardest jobs, literally, in the whole world. And it is so, so scary, right? It's terrifying to watch your kids potentially make disastrous decisions. It's horrifying. And teens, you won't understand for a very, very long time, and I don't expect you to, right? Because your brain's not developed enough to be able to have the capacity for it, so it's not your fault, right? But know that your parents are absolutely terrified because all they want is for you to stay safe and alive, right? So parents, how can you manage your own fear and anxiety, right? Well, the previous slide, right? Doing that individual healthy habits, right? That's part of it. It's also getting your own support and not being afraid to reach out, right? Making sure that you maybe have a therapist so that you can recognize your own triggers, what activates you, right? How to manage emotions and stress in a healthier way. Taking time and a minute to be able to take space before having the conversation with your teen so that you can respond to them instead of react, right? It's just a natural human thing to just react to things, right? It actually takes practice and skills to be able to respond. Avoid being a helicopter parent. I know sometimes that's really, really hard because you think that's your job, right? So make sure that you're striking a little bit of a balance between what you're controlling, right? And what you're allowing your teen to have autonomy around as well. And again, that can be an open conversation. So trust building with your teen, right? Having that open dialogue and saying, okay, this is going to be, part of a trust building exercise. You going to this party, you checking in at the designated times that we've established in our agreements around, boundaries, rules, and consequences, and you coming home at curfew. So know, if you do this, this is going to help build trust, right? And if you break this, it's going to break trust, and we're not going to move forward, right? We're going to stay stuck. So I know it's all of our goals to move forward, so let's follow all of this, right? But again, that open communication and dialogue that's super clearly stated and consistent is what's going to help your teen follow through with all of that. And making sure you have your support systems, right? So coming to things like that, being part of a parent group, being, part of, there's NAMI, there's Al-Anon, there's Family Al-Anon, all really important if your kid is already kind of struggling with any kind of substance abuse and very helpful. So let's talk a little bit about when to actually seek help, right? So when this is an issue, okay? So when, again, as clinicians, right, when we look to diagnose someone with any kind of substance use disorder or mental health issues, right, we're looking at criteria. And one of the biggest things in the criteria is very big changes in personality and behavior, right? So you know your kids, right? You know who they are. You watch who they're struggling to become sometimes, right? So if you see these very, very big changes and shifts in their behavior and personality, that could be an indicator that something bigger is happening that you need support with. Dangerous behaviors, that's, big, big sign that help needs to happen. If they're hurting themselves, if they're putting themselves in very risky situations that could cause harm for themselves or others, all very, very important. Any mental health concerns, we've talked a little bit about mental health comorbidity. It's very important. I come from a clinical kind of landscape and philosophy that most substance use is actually triggered by mental health issues. I think it's very important to make sure teens feel comfortable reaching out for support regarding feeling anxious, depressed, or struggling in any way. And then huge academic failure. If you have a teen that has always done well in school, or even, has maintained kind of B average, C average, and then all of a sudden they are failing everything, that's a telltale sign something's going on, right? So what types of support are available? So we have school counselors. Obviously, that's a huge accessible resource. We're in a school right now. All your teens hopefully are in school and going to school. If they're not, that's probably, academic failure. We need to talk about the warning sign there. And so you need to be seeking more support. We have, therapists, psychiatrists, there's community resources, right? What's happening right now, right? The city of Santa Clarita has these amazing resources that are available, right? And then there's also higher levels of care, right? So something like an IOP, which is intensive outpatient programming, PHP, which is partial hospitalization programming. It's intensive psychotherapy and groups. The individual that attends PHP still lives at home, but they're programming 30 hours a week, right? So it's like a full-time job. And then there's residential level of care, which is actually 24/7 care. So it's when an individual actually moves in to a structured living environment and receives therapeutic services kind of around the clock. And there's also a detox level of care. And that's for any individual that is struggling with substances or alcohol, some of which can be incredibly harmful medically to just stop cold turkey. Alcohol, if it's been being used for a significant amount of time, it's very, very important that a detox happens. There are some services for adolescents and teens, so we can always provide those for you. So I mentioned earlier that I work for Your Behavioral Health, and we have Clear Behavioral Health, which is one of the organizations that I'll focus on specifically here tonight and tell you a little bit about and educate you on. But we also have Neuro Wellness Spa and New Life House. So it's basically an entire ecosystem of care. And New Life Neuro Wellness Spa is all general outpatient psychiatry for medication management, as well as outpatient psychotherapy that's brief and solution focused. So we do treat teenagers 12 and up for psychiatry in Neuro Wellness Spa if that's needed. We don't have outpatient psychotherapy for teens yet, but it's coming. We also do TMS, which is transmagnetic stimulation, and that's a non-medication alternative to treating things like anxiety and depression. New Life House is targeted specifically for young adult males that are struggling significantly with primary substance use. And generally, the age group that we focus on is 18 to about 26. We have one house that goes to a little older, and this is a very more long-term structured sober living, and I've seen amazing, wonderful guys go through that program and just do astoundingly well. And then we have Clear Behavioral Health, which we are incredibly excited to open here in Santa Clarita and be a resource to the community. And we are a true interdisciplinary team. So this facility will be a dual diagnosis facility, primarily focused on a mental health approach for both teens and adults. And we provide amazing care. Obviously, I'm totally biased, and I think we're wonderful because, I helped build the program. So we do take incredibly mindful and important steps to ensuring that our care is comprehensive. We have psychiatry that we work closely with neuro-wellness for. So, teens that are struggling maybe with more comorbid mental health issues can get the care that they need. Each client that comes into our programs has a treatment team of 2. They have a primary therapist that they see weekly for, individual psychotherapy, as well as an individual counselor. The counselor works with them more on things that are more like tangible things, like integrating coping skills, right? Maybe helping support with extra academic things that are needed. And that counselor also serves as a liaison between the treatment team and the family, the treatment team and the school, the treatment team and other providers like their outside therapist or outside psychiatrist if they already have one. So we really ensure that anyone that's coming to seek our services is getting full comprehensive care. So we have locations all throughout the greater Los Angeles area for all of our services, but again, focusing here on Santa Clarita, which we're so excited that will be opening very soon. And that is it. So I'd love to open it up. We have a little bit of time for Q&A if there's any types of questions or anything that you maybe wanted to know a little more about. I saw a lot of conversations happening between teens and adults while I was talking. So if you kind of want support on any of that, I'm happy to answer it. Yeah.
How much do you charge for your services?
From Clear?
Yeah.
So here's the great part. We are incredibly committed to accessible treatment. So we work really, really hard to ensure that we are in network with almost every insurance provider. And that's one thing that I'm really passionate about, just as a clinician. When I started, I didn't know about these higher levels of care. I unfortunately had a very close loved one experience a very significant mental health issue that was comorbid with drug and alcohol use, and it was terrifying. And I didn't know that all of these levels of care existed. I didn't know that they were accessible and we were able to use them through insurance. So I'm really passionate about making sure people know that these services are available, and sometimes depending on your coverage and your provider, there might be a copay, there might not be. So yeah, it's really accessible.
Yeah.
Great question.
Of course.
What else? Anything else? Yeah.
Ma'am, you mentioned a program where the detox program, and you had mentioned it was a program where substance abusers quit cold turkey, correct? Or is that what you said? Well, what would you say for people who argue that quitting cold turkey isn't effective, right? Because I have these debates with young kids, and they tell me that quitting cold turkey doesn't work, and it's like, how else are you supposed to quit then?
Yeah.
So what's your opinion on that?
So there's medical issues that can happen with quitting cold turkey with some substances, right? Specifically, we look at alcohol. Mm-hmm. And so if alcohol has been being used for a significant amount of time in heavy amounts consistently, we look at things like potential, seizures with withdrawals. There's other substances that can cause pretty severe issues as well. So oftentimes we want to make sure we're providing medical safety through that withdrawal. Mm-hmm. So it's serious. Now, we're talking about consistent use that's pretty severe. We're not talking about, I took a couple hits off of a joint or a vape, you know, at a party over a weekend, right? Then yes, you can quit cold turkey and there's no medical issues at all. And I think, well, here's what's interesting. And maybe it's the therapist in me, right? I think having debates around it with any kid, I don't know that you're necessarily going to win the debate, right?
Well, I don't know how else to put it, but yes, I know what you're saying.
I think it may be more about asking questions. So why do you think that? Right? Tell me, right? And understanding where they're actually coming from, and then maybe presenting, you know, some alternatives, right? Oh, have you ever thought about this, right? Because that, again, if the goal is to maintain connection through all of this discussion, then that's a better way to ensure that dynamic stays connected, right? Versus going back and forth about, you know, things.
Right, I see what you're saying. Thank you, ma'am, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, a detox level of care. There are a few places that offer that for teens. We are not one of them. We have detox services only for adults 18 and up, and we have locations in the South Bay for that.
Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions? We have only a couple minutes before I have to turn it over. I think they told me 7:25, right? So we have 4 more minutes for any questions, if there are any.
Thinking about prevention. First, thank you for the information you're bringing today to our families. And my question is about prevention. What strategies have been most successful in order to maintain our teenagers out of that environment?
So hands down, without a doubt, is making sure there's open dialogue and the ability to communicate. That's where I start with any family. If your teen doesn't even feel like they can talk to you about it because they're fearful of getting in trouble and getting literally everything taken from them, they're never going to tell you. Like that, it's just the reality of it, right? And I think that the clinical philosophy that we come from at Clear Behavioral Health, it works, right? And that's part of our strategy is let's make sure that you and your teen can talk about the hard things, right? And the hard things are, hey, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, and I wanna use, or I tried it and it felt great and I loved it, right? What teen's gonna come and say that, right? If they're fearful of just, that's it, their life is over, right? So how, as parents, can you create the environment for them to be able to come and talk to you like that, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. Because if that's the information that we're receiving, that's when we can step in and get them help, right? So number one strategy, how can I create more open communication with my teen? Do I need support to do that from an external source, a school counselor, a therapist, you know, maybe more intensive treatment like an IOP? I think second strategy is when we talked about those clear boundaries, rules, and consequences, right? And writing them out if you have to, and then consistently reviewing them as a family, right? So we make sure everyone's clear about the expectations, right? What's expected, what's okay, what's not okay, right? So I think those are my top 2. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time, your attention. It's valuable, it's appreciated. And know that we are here as a resource in your community, and it's one thing that I am so proud of. I've been with the organization for almost 6 years, and when I started, we had literally like 3 locations. We were so small, and one thing that we've always done, no matter who picks up the phone and calls for help, even if we can't be that support for whatever reason, either we don't take your insurance or the copay is too much, right? We don't say, oh, sorry, not us, good luck. We help find a place for you, right? Or for your team that will work. We've always done that. We continue to do that. So know that that is part of, just the values we hold. We're here to help. We're here to be a resource. So thank you so much, and good luck having clear and open conversations with your teams.